What's up, everybody? My name is Bryce Koon, and we are back here with another episode of Swarm Talk, a reaction piece. Georgia Tech lands a wide receiver through the portal. Fans might be familiar with him. We talk about that and more on today's episode of Swarm Talk here on the Crowded Booth Network.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.
Well, what's up, everybody? My name is Bryce Koon, back here with a reaction episode. Hope it's a fantastic Wednesday morning. And for Georgia Tech fans who went to sleep last night and woke up this morning, maybe you haven't heard the news, Dominick Blaylock has transferred and announced his destination to Atlanta following his former offensive coordinator. We'll call him offensive coordinator. He called some of the plays along with Todd Monken in Athens. But as long as his offensive analyst coach, Buster Faulkner, to the flats, heading to Georgia Tech. It's Dominick Blaylock, the Marietta, Georgia native out of Walton. And this is a 6'1", 205-pound guy that, look, I like this pickup, and we're going to break it down in the receiving room and a little bit more. I was talking with my good friend, South Recruiting, on Twitter about this, and this is a good one, folks. But let's start right here. This is the move we were hinting at last week on the episode. It's a really big get for the receiver room, and this is a guy that in the 2019 class for Georgia, he was really highly touted. And then that freshman season in 2019, Jake Fromm was the quarterback as 18 catches, 310 yards, and 5 touchdowns as a true freshman. He tore his ACL in the SEC title game against LSU that year. We all remember that LSU team. Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, all those guys went on to win the national title. But then the setback occurred a second time when he tore his ACL in fall camp. I believe it was fall camp in the next August. So he really didn't get the chance to really get his footing in Athens. Now, listen, last year he did have a season where he caught 15 passes for 227 yards and a touchdown. But what is Georgia Tech getting in Dominick Blaylock? And I think you're getting a guy that can make plays. He's going to be a nice piece to this room. And overall, I think that this wide receiver room is trending in the right direction when you talk about depth, when you talk about playable depth. That's something I've been very hard on with this Georgia Tech roster, because you have to get to a point where you have depth that can help you out now, but also have you set up for the future. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. But a little bit about Blaylock as that, we'll call him as a recruit in the sense of 2019. He obviously went to Walton, committed very early on in the process. Back in 2017, he was the class of 2019. Barton Simmons over at 24/7 Sports had this original scouting report regarding Dominick Blaylock. He's not overly tall, but an athlete with a powerful frame and a muscular lower body. He has good ball tracking skills, does it effectively in the air, and shows strong hands at the catch point. He has good footwork at the line of scrimmage and releases, talented with the ball in his hands, and has the ability to make plays at running back as well. He runs through arm tackles, doesn't have elite top-end speed, will not out-athlete quarterbacks, but this is a low-risk, likely multi-year Power 5 starter with second- or third-round NFL draft upside. He's also the son of former NBA point guard Mookie Blaylock, for the basketball fans listening in or watching today's podcast. The comparison they gave him back in 2018 was Jarvis Landry, who was then with the Cleveland Browns. And at the time this was written, I guess. That's what it's got set on there. I think he was still with the Dolphins. But anyways, this is a guy that he's very athletic, and I think that if you see what Georgia Tech fans want in this room, we've talked a lot about quarterback, and we had a podcast episode a couple weeks ago regarding, is it going to be Pyron? Is it going to be Haynes King? Is it going to be, somebody else, Zach Gibson? But what I think is so important in this is you have to surround him with weapons to really figure out whoever it is under center can be the guy. And that's what Georgia Tech's done. That's what Buster Faulkner's done, and Brent Key has put an emphasis, say, hey, if so-and-so doesn't pan out, it's not going to be their fault. Or it's not going to be our fault. It's going to be on them to make the move and make that transition to be the guy, and it's not going to be due to a lack of weapons. And so they add a weapon in Dominick Blaylock. But what I think is even more important here is the overall depth of this wide receiver room. Now, look, as I pull up the depth chart here once again and just want to read this off to you, we'll talk later about where we feel like Blaylock could slot in necessarily. I mean, there's a lot of different places. But when you look at what Georgia Tech has done through the transfer portal, now look, we're going to get to talk about some of this. You could argue that out of your two deep roster, which is what you're going to see usually, and maybe some packages, maybe there's an injury, a banged up, or need a rest, you have a guy that comes in behind that. But you've got the kind of the two returners, we'll say in this, and Malik Rutherford, who a lot of people expect to have a big season in 2023. Spring game was very impactful in the reason that a lot of people believe that. And then you have a guy that I'm a big fan of, and a big fan of his game, a big fan of having him healthy in 2023, and that's DJ Moore. You add those two guys to transfer from Alabama, Christian Leary. You have Abdul Janae as well. You have Chase Lane from Texas A&M. But behind those guys, you have Avery Boyd, a very physical receiver. You add in Dominick Blaylock. But you've also got some young guys as well. Don't forget about, Juju Lewis, the redshirt freshman. James Blackstrain, what can he do? I think when you look and see what Georgia Tech wants to do, it's the adding the experience of guys like Chase Lane, Dominick Blaylock, Christian Leary, Abdul Janae, and pairing that with a really nice little young core of receivers they have on campus. We just mentioned some of those names, and I'll read them back out to you. Malik Rutherford, a redshirt sophomore, really hasn't seen a ton of consistent snaps, but I want to take you all the way back to when Nate McCollum entered the portal. And a lot of us fans, is that my alarm just going off, and I've got my breakfast already. A lot of fans going back to the Nate McCollum entering the portal, there was a panic mode. The panic button was pushed. Where is production going to be found, at the receiver position? And I think Georgia Tech has not only answered that question, they've resoundingly answered this question. I mean, Rutherford, Moore, Leary, Lane, Janae, and then the young guys. I mean, look, Eric Singleton Jr. is going to be a fantastic player when the time is right. Bryce Dobson, another guy out of Brookwood that is a great athlete that we had on the podcast. You should go back and watch that interview. But what Georgia Tech is starting to do now at the receiver position, they're building for now and for the future. And this is the optimal way to use the transfer portal and exactly what Tech has to do. You've got to bring in experience now to help grow the young guys and develop the young guys. We've always talked about what has been the issue at Georgia Tech, development. And this is a big key, a big claim in saying, hey, we're going to be good now, but we're also going to develop some of this young talent as well. And I think that's huge for what they want to do. Going back to the trio, GT fan at South Recruiting on Twitter put this out to me, and I wanted to shout him out. Also talked about, Zion Taylor was a guy that they really fought to kind of keep from some pretty big-name schools as well. And so, Dobson, a guy with some really good speed. And then Singleton just put up a 10.34 in the 100 and has been posting blazing times during his track season. Folks, there's a reason to be excited about what's happening in Atlanta. And I think that, and GT Fan's a good friend of mine over on Twitter. I think it's absolutely great to see. But this combination of this room has the potential to not only, like we said, set up this season. I think it can be really solid this season, but it can be solid for years to come in the sense of you've got guys that have multiple years of eligibility left. You've also got a really young, talented core. And if there's success on the field this year, if there's success with some of these freshmen who, are some high-profile, came from some really, great programs in the state of Georgia, they're going to be talking. They're going to be talking to some of the high school guys maybe they played on the 7-on-7 circuit with, maybe they played against. And if Georgia Tech can get production and maybe some development, it doesn't have to be stupid production out of some of these guys as true freshmen. But if they get positive feedback, that trickle-down effect is going to help in recruiting. And it really kind of opens the lid for what we've talked about and kind of that glass ceiling effect of what Georgia Tech has seen in recruiting. You have to have production, whether it's in the win column overall or at your position group. And I think Georgia Tech's sitting in a really good situation with that. Dominic Blaylock is in Atlanta now. Obviously, the Marietta, Georgia native makes his way over. Really excited to see this. I think it's a quality grab, kind of going just more in depth on Blaylock here on the podcast. I think Blaylock is a quality grab because this is a guy that I don't want to say he never reached his full potential. I just don't think he had the opportunity to because of the injury situation that he had and just the accumulation of talent that was happening in Athens. He had a really great year. We talked about it, that freshman season, going back to it, 18 catches, 310 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. But after tearing his ACL in the SEC title game, coming back for fall practice, trying to get ready, knowing that obviously Georgia was gearing up to do something special over the next couple of years, just never really consistently got in the rotation again after tearing that ACL once again. So had the comeback season, looked healthy this past year. You can go watch some of that tape. I might link some of his film down below, and maybe we do a little film review and look at what he brings to the table for this Georgia Tech offense. But Buster Faulkner has done a great job, folks. I said this about a month ago. This was the biggest get for Georgia Tech in this offseason was hiring Buster Faulkner, and I absolutely love the job that he has done so far. They're building weapons, and they're hoping to sustain whatever success they can find this year for years to come on the flats. My name is Bryce Koon. This is Swarm Talk, a quick little reaction episode today talking about the addition of Dominick Blaylock to Georgia Tech. Are the Jackets done in the portal? Well, you need to subscribe to find out. Subscribe here on YouTube if you're watching. We thank you so much. Smash that like button. Leave a comment down below. What do you think about the Georgia Tech receiver room? And then also, if you're listening on podcasts, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcast, or wherever you get your audio, make sure to like, follow, subscribe with us right there. Stay tuned, join the Discord, and sign up for free newsletter on our website. We're going to be releasing, obviously, the podcast straight to your email. We're also going to be doing some articles and some written content, recruiting, everything else as well. My name is Bryce Koon. This is Swarm Talk on the Crowded Booth Network, talking Dominick Blaylock to Georgia Tech. We'll catch you next time, folks. See you later on in the week.
Pile in here and make yourself feel at home. The Crowded Booth is coming on. The Crowded Booth with Bryce Koon.